All right, well, good evening slash afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming through to this panel on communities leading zero waste organics infrastructure. My name is Adi Varshney, and I'm the Network Development Manager with the Global Alliance for Incineration for the US-Canada region. And we're joined today by Stacy Savage and Dan Mash. So Stacy is a lifelong Texan born and raised in the oil and gas mecca known as the Golden Triangle, where both her parents worked at refineries for a collective 75 years. Her personal experience with rotten egg smells, brown hazy skies, and cancers that affected influential family members stamped her career path in environmental stewardship. Known as the Texas Trash Walker, Stacy has been a recycling nerd for almost 20 years. Starting in 2003 as a grassroots community organizer, she played a pivotal role in passing two key pieces of statewide take-back legislation for free. Responsible recycling of computers and TVs. In 2013, Mrs. Savage founded Zero Waste Strategies, LLC, an environmental consulting firm specializing in supporting the new circular economy. She is a certified true advisor, and her client list includes Fortune 500 companies, local government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and institutions. Through her multi-tiered online courses and in-person consultations, clients receive customized waste reduction plans for increased efficiency, deeper customer loyalty, employee empowerment, and a green marketing edge. Thanks so much, Stacy. Looking forward to your presentation. Then we have Dan Match, who will be presenting first today. Dan has worked in recycling, composting, and organic farming since 1982. His zero waste focus looks to marry these interests to maintain the highest value of our resources through creating local circular economies. Dan spearheads EcoCycle's focus on utilizing organic waste and other resources in a local and global effort to restore healthy soil and sequester carbon. Dan serves as co-chair of Colorado's U.S. Composting Council state chapter. Cool. Well, welcome, you guys. I'm really excited to hear both of your presentations. And I guess we can just get right into it with Dan's presentation on the great work that EcoCycle is doing around composting and climate.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Find my... Okay. So I'm going to talk about a model that we at EcoCycle are working on to build compost infrastructure that is community scale or appropriate scale. That's a distributed model rather than a large centralized facility. If you were just at the plenary, this is very much in line with what Brenda Platt was just talking about. And what I want to emphasize today is how we are focusing on, rather than focusing on diversion, we're focusing on the community benefits of building soil through composting. See if I can figure out how to advance my slides here.
It could be down on the left.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Whatever I just did, hopefully I can do that again.
Whatever you did, keep doing it.
Okay. So if you're not familiar with EcoCycle, EcoCycle is one of the nation's oldest and largest mission-driven recyclers. We've been around since 1976. We are and have always been the processor for all the for the traditional recyclable stream in Boulder County. We operate the MRF. We also do innovative hard recycling through our Center for Hard Recycled Materials. We do a wide variety of outreach and education, both to adults and children. We do a lot of advocacy at the state level, especially. And as Alex Danovich was just pointing out, we're one of the mission-driven recyclers in that we're both operators and advocates. So I am going to speak a little bit within the context of the the Universal Zero Waste Ordinance that City of Boulder has. I am not speaking for City of Boulder, but I just a little bit about the context of where we operate. And I'm going to probably a little bit annoyingly skip through these slides quickly. But City of Boulder has a Universal Zero Waste Ordinance that was adopted in 2015, and they allowed 2 years to folks to get used to it before they enforced it in 2017. The city does not dictate rates or levels of service. It's a free market system in Boulder. And just very quickly, what the ordinance requires is that businesses must they have to use the right containers, have the right signs. They have to have a training system for their employees. And then both residences and businesses must subscribe to compost recycling and trash collection service. And they, if they have tenants, then they must provide the tenants with information about those services. City of Boulder has a goal of 85% diversion by 2025. You can see that it is slowly but surely moving in that direction, although not fast enough to make it there by 2025 likely. But it's given the context of where we are as a state, which is terrible. We have a total of 16% waste diversion, so we're only diverting 6% of our food and yard waste in Colorado as a state. So City of Boulder and Boulder County and all the communities in Boulder County are way ahead of that. So they're true champions in our state. So I'm going to talk specifically about organics here, obviously. The one thing I want to say that the Universal Zero Waste Ordinance, the real impact it has had on the organic stream is well visualized in this graph here. You can see that the real impact is on the commercial organics diversion. The tonnage, as soon as the ordinance went into effect, the amount of commercial organics diversion has gone up astronomically. So what's happening around us is the three largest cities in our area called we call the Front Range, Fort Collins, Longmont, and now Denver are all doing their own version of mandatory recycling and composting ordinances, and this has had a ripple effect. There's been a negative result of this in a rise in contamination. When you have mandatory ordinance, obviously there's a lot more participation, and there's a lot varying levels of understanding of the guidelines. So all of the organics that are collected in that Front Range area go to one large regional composter, especially given that Denver is just about to come online. With their program, they have pushed back a bit in that they have pretty much a zero tolerance for contamination. They're rejecting loads left and right, imposing fines. Right now, the focus is on the commercial stream. The residential stream, the curbside stream is considered to be contamination, low enough contamination that it is not a focus right now. But as a result, the Universal Zero Waste Ordinance has now suspended front of house organics collections unless there is a proven busing system in place. We're talking about, how do we do this contamination education? How do we isolate the most contaminated streams? Do we need a pre-processing step? And the question we're all asking ourselves is, is this akin to recycling in the 80s? That Boulder, that EcoCycle and other mission-based recyclers have dealt with for forever, or is this a real serious issue? I think there's a couple of silver linings here, and that's where our opportunity is as well. One thing is that we have verified that if there is a responsible contact at each business, and this is not just a billing contact, actually a person on site who's responsible for operations. If you have that person, then it's actually pretty easy to put together a feedback system and tell them, okay, we saw this, and this in your stream, please clean it up. And they do. But we also are noting that there is this thriving and growing population or network of community scale haulers and composting entrepreneurs, bucket-based haulers. They do not have this contamination problem. And of course, that's because they have a much more personal connection with their customers. So, what can we learn from that? And even with their commercial customers, certainly contamination is a bigger issue for these bucket-based collectors, but it's still, by and large, compared to municipal collections, those contaminations issues are pretty negligible. So the opportunity that we see is to talk about it differently in our outreach. Rather than diversion, talk about compost quality and climate resilience. We have, Boulder, and I'm sure not unique in that there's great support for local farmers, great interest in strengthening our local food system. So that's an opportunity that that's a channel that we go through with our messaging. Also, when composting is part of a regenerative agriculture approach, you have lots of community benefits. You have water conservation. That's of course a huge issue here in the West. You're building soil health. There's carbon sequestration, and you have a stronger community. So what that looks like for EcoCycle, what we're doing is represented in the graphic in the middle. So it starts on the left. Start with clean organic, with clean discards. Then it goes to local ideally distributed compost infrastructure. We have to change that graphic. That does not look just like distributed, but local rather than 50 miles away, which we're doing right now. And especially develop that infrastructure specifically to provide compost for our local farmers, or engage the farmers, empower the farmers to make compost themselves, and have the benefit of creating soil for all of us. The specific models that we've used to do this, over here on the right, we have a couple of community science projects. We did a 3-year backyard carbon sequestration project. That's the upper right. And then that has segued into a project that we're doing with a 10-year project we're doing with the City of Boulder called Cool Boulder. Carbon sequestration and learning about your soil is interesting to a point, much more interesting to actually grow things for community benefit. So Cool Boulder is focused on starting with building soil, and then using it on a community scale, tree growing, so shade canopy and pollinator plant network. This is both on public and private land. So that's an exciting program. And then on the left, we have, we're partnering with several high-profile farms locally to demonstrate a specific compost technology called aerated static pile, which is a technology that can work, at this tiny scale that's pictured here, It can work for a larger scale as well. And the important point about it is that it can work in a more densely populated area without creating an odor nuisance, and also is a very small footprint. We're also doing what we call carbon farming demonstrations, which we are doing science on using compost and different compost additives like biochar and mycelium to see what that does on soil with our local farm partners. So how this how we're meeting our goals with these projects. First of all, we are cutting down on the carbon footprint and costs of transport to a distant compost facility. We are also creating a much better environment. Nobody wants to live next to a great big compost facility. So this is a distributed system is far more in line with the community's expectation. When you say, we want to compost locally, they think about composting on farm and all the beautiful visions that come from that. And so that's where we're trying to, we don't want to have a big stinky compost facility in Boulder County. We want to have really cool compost operations. Again, the goal is clean, high quality compost rather than diversion, and making compost that farmers that are useful to farmers. In order to get there, we need to change the state regulations, because right now there's nothing between backyard and giant regional composters. Have to change the local codes as well. So there's a lot of policy work to do, and I'll stop there because it looks like I'm running over.
Thank you, Dan. And you have some questions in the chat if you want to answer some of those real quick. But we thank you for sharing your perspective, especially as a mission-based recycler doing this implementation work on the ground. I think that's a really valuable perspective to share. And I think we all want to see more organizations approaching waste management, the way that EcoCycle does it in our own communities. So thank you for that. And now I'll pass it on to Stacy, who's been doing some work around organics in Austin and in Texas.
Y'all, yes, I'm Stacy Savage. I am in the Austin, Texas area. I am CEO and founder of Zero Waste Strategies. As Addie mentioned earlier, folks know me as the Texas Trash Talker. And I'm going to be going over some of the key components, benefits, and such for the City of Austin's Universal Recycling Ordinance, kind of like what Dan was talking about, a little different, but also get into more of the ways that community members can get activated within their own government regarding policy setting. So I'm sure many of you have seen some of these statistics throughout the day, but it's important to wrap up this entire conference with the big stats regarding how much is ending up in our material stream regarding organic food waste, how many Americans are going hungry because we have not connected the loop, and how COVID has really exacerbated food insecurity and widened food deserts across the US as well, and how we have got to address and fund Black and Brown communities in their own sustainability that are much more heavily affected via systemic and racial injustices. So according to the EPA, what happens to our food waste in 2017 alone, almost 41 million tons of food waste was generated, and only about 6.3% were diverted. This really impacts food security, resource conservation, and contributes to 18% of the total US methane emissions that come from those landfills. So getting into 5 concepts of organics diversion. And when we're talking about organics, we're really not talking about, hey, there's an organic section in my grocery store. We're talking about the stuff that comes out of your produce section in your grocery store. So of course, those food products and even yard waste shrubbery, any of the green waste that from like landscaping companies or your own backyard. So the first one we're talking about here is refuse. This is something that both businesses, and actually all 5 of these, this is something that both businesses and people at home can do. So inventory, inventory, inventory. This is critical, knowing what you have on hand already and not over purchasing so that the materials or the produce or proteins that you did buy go to waste while they're waiting to be used because you ordered too many or too much of a certain product. FIFO or FIFO, however you want to say it, is first in, first out. This is a dating system where you rotate in your cold storage walk-in, or you can date containers in your home freezer or refrigerator. And this way, you know when it was cooked and served and refrigerated, and you can know also whenever a certain time frame you need to use it. And temperatures, this is helping us refuse waste. Temperatures for your appliances. And I'm talking about freezers, refrigerators, cleaning the back of your refrigerator of all that gunk and dust on the grill that keeps the pressure tank cool, and making sure that the coolant levels are kept at the appropriate level. Those are things that can really help us refuse waste, is doing the forethought ahead of time and making sure that the maintenance schedule is on point. So next we come to reduce. Of course, you can always purchase less, but do that more times per week. And then using materials or using produce and proteins that you already have on hand. So making just a recipe from something that doesn't require you to go out and buy something in order to complete it. Just use whatever you have on hand. I know if you have kids, that might be a little bit more pressing of an issue, but it's a good thing to at least try to see what you can come up with that can be innovative. This is also something that you can allow the chefs or the cooks in your business kitchen to be able to have autonomy to use what is already on hand to serve, let's say, a special of the day or a soup of the day. It's using those materials that are about to spoil so that they don't spoil and that you're not paying for it twice, right? You're not paying for it to come into your business or your home. It doesn't get used, it gets spoiled, and then you got to toss it. You know, and it gets hauled away. That's your second way of paying for it. So the reuse, food scraps are great for reducing down to soup stocks, sauces, that kind of thing, and really repurposing foods. Do you have avocados that are going brown? Well, you know, maybe you can make them into a guacamole. Maybe you've got 2-day-old bread that needs to be chopped up and baked again for salad croutons. There's all kinds of things that you can do, or put it in bread pudding. There's all kinds of things that you can do for those aging foods that are still consumable, but they're not to that point where you have to get rid of them. And then obviously donation, well, not obviously, excuse me, I will take that back. Donation is really critical, but many businesses don't see that as a viable solution for their food waste because they still feel that they're under the perception that they are going to be held legally responsible. So this is an education piece where we need to help businesses understand that if kept to proper time and temperature standards of their state, they will be able to donate, and they can actually get a tax credit through the federal government if they keep a manifest of how much they donated, what they donated, where it went. I believe it's a 15% fair market value of those donated goods. And then rot, of course, as a last resort, we want to see compost going back to revitalize our soils and to bring about even more nutritious crops. So let's get into the City of Austin Universal Recycling Ordinance. This is a recycling ordinance for all commercial properties and multifamily dwellings that are 4 units or more. In phase 1, it was a rollout process. So in phase 1, it was really the larger businesses based on square footage had to go first. So your big box stores had to go to start recycling and implement these programs way before your little mom and pop convenience store. Which is only fair in my mind. And then organics diversion is phase 2 of the ordinance. It requires all Austin food permitted businesses to dramatically reduce food waste to landfill. And there's many ways that businesses could do that. Some of the ones that we just talked about on the previous slide regarding refuse, reduce, reuse, repurpose, but it's not a composting ordinance. Composting is not the requirement. We would much rather see businesses use the higher and better uses of the organic food waste or the organics of foods that are still consumable to be donated is one way to go, or to work with farmers and ranchers to funnel that to livestock feed and that kind of thing. So annual education, all businesses have to educate their employees annually on how to recycle properly, and if you have a food permit, how to also follow the food waste diversion program that has been implemented at that specific business based on the city's allowed practices. And then by February 1st of every year, each commercial property and food business has to file a diversion plan. And this shows the city of Austin, hey, this is what we're doing with our food waste. This is what we're doing with our recyclables. It's going here. Here's all the documentation. You have to file a plan every year to show the city how you are complying. So the city of Austin did a waste audit for commercial businesses and multifamily properties. And it was a pretty sizable waste audit. It was kind of a citywide type thing. They found that more than 80% of what is being buried or incinerated could have been reduced, recycled, or composted. So you can see over here on the actual graph, the brown is the 19%. Everything else is 81% that could have been diverted through that, which is the major finding of this study. The city of Austin also provides businesses with rebates to help them comply and help them give a little bit more of a boost to get in alignment with these policies. So whether that's for food donations, composting programs, sustainable packaging, shared services between properties, let's say that's maybe like a strip mall, and you've got one property with 15 different businesses on that, there's an opportunity for these businesses to come together to share the services. Increased recycling options is a program that can be incentivized, and even helping purchase indoor recycling bins. So let's get into compliance rates, because this is really where the city of Austin kind of shows its efficacy on this policy. This is just for recycling, and you can see at the bottom they started tracking, the diversion rates and the compliance factor in 2017. But you'll have to think about the year before. The larger businesses had to start their actual plans or getting their programs started in later 2016, I believe. So in February 1st of each year is when the plans are due. And you can see that October 1st is when each new category of business becomes affected. So when I talked about square footage or what size of business, every October 1st is when a new category of business becomes affected. And all of those businesses, plus the newly affected businesses, have to put their plan into the city by February 1st. And you can see in the very beginning, you've got some of those folks who are very gung-ho, they're ready to do it. And it creeps up to, you got your February 1st deadline. Oops, we let it pass. We didn't quite get there. Now you can see in May, June, July, August, we're really getting to that point where the city is starting to issue certified letters of noncompliance. And this is when they start to really kind of not where they can pull in the code compliance department. And we really don't want to see the compliance department get involved at all. We really want these businesses to really show how they're doing the work on their own and with the assistance of the department as well. So here are the organics plan submission rate. You can see that 85% is their, kind of their, how would you say it? Their efficiency or efficacy rate that they consider the program a success, and it's that February 1st. As you can see at the bottom, they started much later than the actual recycling ordinance went into place. Remember, this is phase 2, 2019. You can see that, again, starting in October, very low rate of participation, but it inches up. We haven't quite crossed that 85% threshold just yet, but I have a feeling in 23, 24, and 25, we are definitely going to cross that because we've seen it in the previous graph, how it happened just a few years later. I'm sure that's going to happen this time. So another program, well, let me go back real quick. The Zero Waste Strategies was contracted for 3 years under the Austin Resource Recovery Department in order to help them implement the Universal Recycling Ordinance compliance. Another program that we worked on was for the city of Dallas, and we did 9 waste audits at businesses across Dallas in all quadrants, upper income, lower income, and office parks, apartment complexes, restaurants. The compiled reports were delivered to us or to the Dallas City Council, and that showed a cross-sectional view of the state of business recycling in the city of Dallas. And the council is now considering, based on our data, the expansion of its current apartment recycling ordinance to eventually also include all commercial properties and then food permitted businesses as well, like City of Austin. Unfortunately, this is the state of recycling for Dallas businesses. We got about 25% recycling rate. So need to do a little bit more work there. Of course, you can be zero waste in your personal living. We always want to encourage that, of course. You're bringing your reusables, your straws, you're doing everything that you can to reduce your own impacts. But one thing that we can do to reduce your city's carbon footprint is really going after local policies that require businesses to do their part. It's not just about what you're rolling out in your bin to the curb. It's what are the businesses doing as well, because they collectively are creating the vast majority of the trash recycling and composting. So grassroots campaign organizing, resident lobbying efforts to city council or your county commissioners, public town hall opportunities, getting the stakeholder meetings together with industry, the different sectors of industry, get involved in the policy planning, the strategic implementation, and keep their feet to the fire to hold them accountable for success. So I will end with Zero Waste Strategies has a brand new Cash for Trash Green business program. We have a 3-tiered offering where we have online programs and in tier 1 and tier 2, and then we have a tier 3 white glove service as well. So this is us, and this is my contact information. Feel free to screenshot that if you want to get in contact with me. I am open to answering any questions.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and I really appreciate the way that you have made the connection between needing policy shifts that do need to be backed up by cultural shifts and shifts in our own homes as well. So thank you for that presentation. I will now share my screen. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm with Gaia. We're a worldwide alliance of more than 800 groups in more than 90 countries around the world, working on zero waste and environmental justice. We recently released a report that links zero waste strategies to climate mitigation, and it's called Zero Waste to Zero Emissions, and we're really trying to bolster the strategies that people are already working on the ground with credible and robust research. We ran a greenhouse gas emissions calculator, a little bit about that on that slide, but I'm strapped for time. That found that the emissions reduction potential of zero waste in 8 different cities around the world averaged at 84%. And for just looking at organics management strategies, it would reduce an average of 62% of landfill methane emissions. And a little bit of more global context, there is momentum around reducing methane, which is a greenhouse gas, as I'm sure you've already heard, 84 times more potent than CO2 in the short term. So, and this is actually a pledge that was launched in part by the US at the last COP. So I'm going to get into an example here in the United States and follow up with some around the world with some examples that we here can maybe learn from. So in 2019, thanks to the tireless work of activists, Detroit shut down its incinerator. And this huge victory for public health and climate left some challenges, one being gentrification. So the Breathe Free Detroit campaign works with communities surrounding the incinerator to establish community land trusts, to strengthen community ownership to land that's now more desirable, to protect longtime residents and businesses. And then there's the issue of what to do with all the waste. So official waste diversion in Detroit is quite low at 4%, well below the state average, but that number doesn't reflect the efforts led by grassroots community organizations, urban farms, food rescue programs, and local composting companies, as well as universities. So these groups diverted over 2,300 metric tons of material in 2021. And a significant portion of Detroit itself's waste diversion and zero waste initiatives over the last decade have been led and initiated by the city's grassroots networks. They're collaborating with the city council on a green task force to build up a citywide composting program, and working on scaling up composting pilot programs that they've been running in conjunction with an organization. It's a learning exchange with an organization called the Mother Earth Foundation in the Philippines. And in our Zero Waste and Climate Report, we worked with local activists to draw up some recommendations for the city of Detroit, including removing renewable energy credits being provided by the state for waste-to-energy facilities, implementing a citywide integrated network of multi-scale household, community, and industry compost systems, and also addressing the generational equities that exist in Detroit, because we need to incorporate climate justice in order for a more zero waste and climate resilient city to actually be possible. And this looks like supporting the powerful grassroots work that is already taking place in the city of Detroit. So now on to some grassroots examples from around the world that communities in the US might be able to learn from. Like I mentioned, there is learning exchange happening between folks working on this issue in Detroit and in the Philippines. In 2013, Tacloban City in the Philippines was devastated by one of the most powerful typhoons ever recorded. And the impact was worsened by the lack of waste management infrastructure in the city. The streets were awash with debris with nowhere for it to go. So the city went down a zero waste program around separate collection and processing. In just 1 year, they were able to divert 55% of waste from landfill, up from 10% the previous year. This involved various forms of neighborhood level outreach for it to work, but what was most important was going door to door. So one-to-one visits with households where residents were allowed to ask questions directly. And this robust public outreach supported really high rates of compliance, with 63% compliance within 2 years of implementation. So that's nearly 2/3 of people complying within 2 years. And composting does wonders to improve soil resilience, as Dan had mentioned earlier. So by fertilizing Tacloban's local gardens with compost, the soils are better able to absorb and detoxify floodwaters, improving resilience in the face of future storms in the city. Then there's an example in Brazil, in Florianopolis. They had a rat problem that was so bad that 2 community members actually died from exposure to rat urine. And the residents learned that the cause of their problem was that the waste management system, and food waste in particular, was attracting rodents. So a dedicated group together where workers collected residents' organic discards and composted them to fertilize school and community gardens. Now the program serves over 2,400 people and is a model of how organics management not only cools the climate, but also is protecting against public health threats. And this is something that's relevant to where I live in New York City. Officials recently held a press conference looking at the connection between our rampant rat problem and waste. Their solution was to alter the hours of waste collection without really talking about, the importance of removing organic waste from that stream and collecting it separately. So, this is a solution to not only the waste problem, it's also a way to address the rat issue. And this also presents an opportunity to engage people who wouldn't otherwise be interested in waste or climate, but, have that visceral reaction to the rats running our streets that so many of us have. Looking at India, which is where I'm originally from, my hometown of Mumbai, is employing anaerobic digestion, as is Trivandrum, the capital of the state of Kerala in the south. And these are serving as models for other cities in the region. Anaerobic digestion is often well suited for dense areas with large amounts of organic waste and little room for composting facilities, but it does have higher capital costs and requires more technical training to operate. And it's important to avoid some of the potential pitfalls of anaerobic digestion as a technology that I've listed here on this slide. It's important that it's a source-separated stream of organics, not mixed waste, not crops that are being grown for fuel. We need to be prioritizing waste prevention and the zero waste hierarchy, and there's some other considerations there as well. But it does work in certain situations, and it's working here in these two examples. And Brenda from ILSR is saying that ILSR released a guide on avoiding rats in organic waste collection situations. That is really, really helpful. Encourage folks to check that out. So in Mumbai, a women's liberation organization uses anaerobic digestion, and it produces two products from this stream of source-separated organic waste: high-grade biogas, which is used for cooking, and a slurry, which is used as soil nourishment. This approach has reduced the need for costly transportation and landfill waste because it's a small-scale system, while it provides jobs for women waste pickers, which are also taught business administration skills through the program. In Trivandrum in India, on the bottom, the city government began a campaign in 2014 to enforce separate organic waste collection and treatment. So through extensive outreach and education, as well as subsidies to set up small-scale treatment units like compost piles, kitchen bin composters, and micro anaerobic digesters, the city actually achieved 80% participation in organic waste separation in the residential sector. And mind you, this is a really large city. It's the capital of a state in India, and 88% in the commercial sector within just 5 years. And the vast majority of this organic waste is managed at decentralized home or community scale facilities, which is really reducing public costs for collection and management. So yeah, love women in waste. Seriously, I had the privilege of meeting a lot of these people leading these initiatives when Gaia was recently at COP27. And I really do think we in the United States have a lot to learn for examples around the world, particularly where there is leadership in the global South. And here are some resources that we want to offer on building zero waste cities. All of them contain components on organics collection. And so, yeah, thank you, everybody. I think that's all the time we have for today. If you have questions for folks or things to share with others, please drop them in the chat. As Ruth also shared in the chat, after this session, we're going back to the main room for next steps and happy hour sessions. So thank you so much to all for participating. Thank you, Dan and Stacy, and have a good rest of your evening.
Thank you so much, Addie, Dan, Stacy. Really appreciate it. We'll see you over in the other session.